Thank you. So I'm here to talk to you about account recovery. And this is something that's been an interest of mine for a long time, going back over 10 years to one of my very first consulting assignments when I was asked, with permission, to try and hack into a bank. And in the next 20 seconds, I can teach you how I did it. I always like to start on the login page. It's sort of the door to the vault. And I tested all the usual things you might know as a pen tester, look for SQL injection, cross-site scripting, check for password strength policies, password lockouts. All those things are pretty good on this bank. But there's always one more link on every login page, whether it's a bank or any other site, the forgot password link. So for this bank, I clicked on it. I entered an email address of a customer, and it asked me what my favorite color was. And it let me guess as many times as I wanted. So everything you need to know to hack into a bank you learned in kindergarten. And that's a particularly trivial password reset question. But you may have heard of Guccifer. He gained notoriety a few years ago for breaking into the accounts of numerous public figures, including Colin Powell and aides to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. But the secret behind the most wanted computer criminal in the world was just the realization that once you're famous enough, all of those recovery questions are literally trivia. They're just things you can look up. And for more and more of us, as more and more of our information is online, that's becoming the case for everybody. And account recovery also touches on another windmill I've been tilting at for much of my career, which is phishing and passwords. And passwords aren't really the problem either. Passwords are just one way to solve the problem of authenticating a user. They're not a very good way, but for all the work we've done to come up with something better, we still haven't hit on anything that a user still can't manage somehow to forget or to lose. So fixing passwords also always comes with fixing account recovery. And if we make passwords much stronger, we haven't really solved the problem if we leave sort of a weaker way through account recovery mechanisms to still get the same access to your account. But my title of the talk was Beyond Email, because I'm not the first person to realize that password reset questions are terrible. Most places now will email you a password reset link. And this is an example just of some of my personal identity graph online, some of the services I use on a regular basis. And you'll see I log into a lot of things through Facebook, but eventually all credential graphs on the internet lead to your email. At least I'm a security expert, right? I understand how important that email is. I have two-factor authentication turned on. I'm doing everything I can to protect myself, so I should be okay, right? Well, as probably many of you here realize, email is a really old protocol. It's one of the only non-end-to-end secure protocols still in wide use. And that means from the moment that I enter my email address, there are threats at every turn. Mail servers, DNS, ad keyword scanners, rogue employees, and any of my own endpoint devices that might happen to be compromised can get access to my email and have unfettered access to recover as many accounts as they want without rate limiting, without contextual reauthentication, and with the ability to probably delete all user-visible evidence of what's happened. And if that happens to be a corporate email address, there's a whole other set of threats. I might have an admin, I might have IT staff, I might have email security appliances scanning for spam and malware, I might have e-discovery and other legal access archive systems. All of these also have access to the plain text of those account recovery emails before I ever see it. And the other inconvenient fact is that the next billion people to come online won't all have an email address. Now, I'm a middle-aged American. I got an email address with my first Unix account when I got on the internet in the late 80s, but that's just not how most people use the internet today. And even today, a lot of people don't use email on a regular basis, or they think of it just as a place to collect account sign-up spam, not as the pillar of account security that you as an online service depend on it to be. And if email is so bad, what about SMS? Well, the story's not a lot better there. SMS is expensive to deliver. In many cultures, people are reluctant to share their phone number with online services, or where they give it away, it may be an unstable identifier. It's common for people in India to change their phone number and SIM card multiple times a day even to get the best deal on telephony services depending on who they're calling and what time of day it is. SMS happens to also be the only other protocol still in wide use that has no end-to-end security. And those risks are compounded by often poor controls on the reassignment of phone numbers. So what can we do? What's the right account recovery mechanism? When I think about the accounts I use, there are a few that can do a good job of authenticating me in the absence of a password. So Facebook has my social graph and can use my friends to help me recover. Google knows my trusted locations and other devices that I trust, speakers and home stereo equipment that happens to be in my home and no one can learn about remotely. And my bank might be able to do an in-person ID check or even check it online in some countries. but I don't necessarily want to give my government ID to every website I visit. So what I really want my personal identity graph to look like is something more like this, where the core accounts that I use all the time that have a strong identity footprint are redundantly cross-linked, and where the services I use less often or where I have less of an identity footprint can use any or multiple of those core accounts to recover me if I lose my password or other access devices. And the insight here is I'm not singling out particular services being more or less important in terms of their identity and authentication. It's just the insight is which ones are important and which ones are core is different for every person, and it might change over time. So I want a generic solution that lets us use the ones that we trust and that know us the best. You might be thinking, doesn't this sound a lot like what we were promised with federated login systems like OAuth? And where those are available, they do go a long way to solving the problem. But federated identity has incentive and operational issues that have prevented it from having universal reach. If we go back to the idea that account recovery and passwords are just different paths through the same authentication space. You can think of a password as sort of a rope bridge over a gorge. It gives us fast access, it's convenient, something we're going to use on a day-to-day basis, but it's something that might fail. Whereas account recovery is kind of the long and winding road that takes a longer time to travel, but is there as a backup. I think of federated login systems as kind of replacing that fast pass access with something more secure and more convenient. But there's a lot of services that don't want to do that. They don't want to trust or rely on anyone else to make sure that their users have access to their services. If you're a bank or something like that, you might want to own that relationship with your customer. But if maintaining access at all costs is such an important goal, there's a lot of room to improve that bottom path, removing the hazards, removing the failure modes, and still have it be something that every service would want to take advantage of. We take GitHub here as a really good example of that. The source code assets that you manage on GitHub as a developer might be more valuable to an attacker than even a really large bank account. You know, we talk about all the open source projects that Facebook has on there, proprietary source code inside of organizations. These are highly targeted assets. And so GitHub doesn't support federated login in part because they want to control and manage those risks directly. They want to know how strong your password is. They want to offer you a wide variety of two-factor authentication methods and be able to enforce that you use those. And that wide use of two-factor authentication is great for security for GitHub, but it presents a difficulty for their customers when they lose access to one of their keys or their phone. So what if, for the purposes of account recovery, you could link your Facebook account to your GitHub account with just a single click? And later, if you ever lose access to your GitHub, you can come back to your Facebook and get an attestation that can be part of recovering a two-factor protected account at GitHub. What if you lose access to your Facebook account at the same time? Maybe your password manager failed. In that case, Facebook has ways, like using your social graph and getting assistance from your friends to recover your account. That's information GitHub doesn't have naturally, and it would be very expensive for them to build and acquire. So you can recover your Facebook account, and then after you wait a little while, because when you recover your Facebook account, we want to let you know that something happened, give you a chance to respond. We'll lock you out of recovering other accounts and pivoting through your Facebook for a while to make sure it's secure. And this just kind of highlights the idea that what we're trying to build here is not a fast path replacement for the password. We're trying to build something that is a reliable set of steps that anyone can follow to recover their accounts without opening a less secure path for attackers. How can we build this kind of experience? To give it the most reach, we'll use a web browser, and we'll build our protocol as an over-the-top protocol on top of HTTPS. That way, you won't need any plugins, you won't need any special software, you won't need to wait for browser support. You know, similar to how you might save a favorite picture to your Facebook account so that you can always have access to it if you lose your phone, we can save a package of data from GitHub to your Facebook account that allows you to recover your account. We'll call it a recovery token. This recovery token contains information that GitHub can use to reprove your identity, but it's sealed cryptographically so that Facebook can't see that information while we're holding it. Then later on, if you ever lose access to your GitHub account, you can come back to Facebook. We can reprove it's you. You're the same person who saved this recovery token originally, and we can countersign it and send an attestation back to GitHub to that effect, which they can use as part of other signals to help recover your account. Specifying how this works is relatively easy, actually, since we're building over the top of HTTPS. We just have to define what that recovery token data package looks like. We'll give it a fixed format to keep it simple. We'll add a little bit of metadata, like a timestamp, and indicate what service it came from and what service it was intended for, so we can verify it correctly. We'll make sure that the payload that contains any information about you personally is opaque and encrypted. And we'll assign or countersign it as it travels through the browser to preserve its authenticity. To build the protocol and the communication between the servers, we'll publish a JSON configuration at a well-known HTTPS URL. That will let us bootstrap both the endpoints we use for the protocol and the keys. That lets us use the existing Web PKI for identity and be able to rotate keys easily without having to invent a new identity system. And we'll also publish an endpoint that we can use for callbacks about the token status. One of the things you don't know if you have email or SMS set up as a recovery method is when that goes out of scope. And that's a problem. Your users might not have their backup method available when they need it because they forgot to update it everywhere when they change their email address. This way you can get a notification. You can remind the user, hey, you should go update and provide a new recovery path because you closed that old account. And finally, we want an API so that sites can actually implement this in a way that's convenient for users. And we can provide a HTTP post-based API that lets us work even with clients that don't have JavaScript enabled. Or we can have an iframe API using post message that lets us have higher performance and a better user experience and better control over how this experience works on an individual website. And this all can reach mobile clients too using modern web views that share cookie jars but protect them from the individual applications. And I don't have time in 20 minutes to go over everything that's in the protocol. I'll be pointing you to a link where we've open sourced it today at the end of the talk. But it's worth talking about what's not in the protocol. There's no personally identifiable information about you or any kind of identity claim. And there's no permission grants to do anything at the service providing the account recovery attestation. The only thing that gets learned by either party here is that you have an account at the other service. The exact identifier is not revealed. And what kind of results can we obtain by designing and building a protocol like this? We get a situation where I can choose the stable and highly attached account I want to use to recover my account in any other service. By publishing the protocol over the top of HTTPS, we can discover peer support at runtime. It might be using my email address domain. I might still use my email provider, just something more secure than email to do the actual work of recovery. Or I might choose any other kind of provider. Because there's no user identifiers exchanged, we're not tied to something like an email address or a phone number as a particular identifier type. You can build a protocol that resists data breach by not including any PII in there and by having runtime discovery of keys. These keys can't be associated to a recovery provider after a short time window because we have a timestamp and a token binding, so even if they leak, they can't be used. And they can't be used at the service provider without a fresh counter signature. So even if they end up on pastebin, no private data is disclosed and nothing useful to an attacker is leaked. And we can make a protocol that is as easy to set up as email or SMS recovery. By using a web view or a web browser, we can do it in band with 1 or 2 clicks. And by pushing privilege away from a site, this is really important. The account recovery providers say, Facebook, we don't have to trust anything about GitHub. GitHub's not asking us for any personal information about users. They're not asking for rights to do anything on Facebook. We don't have to get them to agree in advance to a terms of service or things like that. We can have completely permissionless enrollment, just like you have with email or SMS. And we get interesting benefits from pre-saving these recovery tokens. So we can recover an account that's been vandalized or is under contention because we have a piece of data that tells us who was in control of the account at a known good point in the past. And because we pre-save this and because the contents are opaque, you could put something like an encryption recovery key or a shard of a recovery key into that data and allow recovering per user encrypted data at rest, something that you can't do with email, SMS, or other protocols that do just-in-time recovery. You may be thinking if you're an identity engineer, well, this sounds a lot like OAuth. And it does sound a lot like OAuth. It's very similar. But I like to think of it as kind of a mirror image of OAuth. OAuth is a model that relies on pulling privilege. So I'm asking a third-party website for, what's the user's email address? What's their name? Can I have permission to see this data? That means you have a high-friction consent experience at the beginning. And then once you've established that user consent, you can use it over and over again very easily with no friction. Recovery, we want really the opposite experience. We want a push model, and that means we can have a very low friction provisioning process, but then every time that recovery capability is used, we want it to have a very strong consent and re-identification experience. And that subtle difference in the flow, the push versus pull model, gives us very different results in what we can achieve in terms of the desirable properties of a recovery protocol. We wanted to be able to recover and provision to any service of a user's choice. That's really not possible in practice with how OAuth deployments work today. Because of that privileged pull model, you often have to agree to terms of service, set up an app ID, do all of this advanced provisioning. And in practice, that's meant OAuth deployments have never been as diverse as email or SMS. We wanted to have data breach resilience. OAuth tokens tend to be bearer tokens that require revocation or reissuance if they're leaked. And we were able, with our protocol, with the recovery protocol, to demonstrate control at a known good point in time and recover encryption keys. And neither of these are really design goals of OAuth. Now, you may be thinking, OK, we've moved email out of the way, and now we're using Facebook. Doesn't this mean I have to trust Facebook? Aren't we just re-centralizing all that trust at a different place? And of course, I hope you do trust Facebook. But first of all, we're opening this protocol. We hope that you'll find implementations of this available at a broad variety of sources in the near future, and you'll be able to choose the accounts that you trust, not just Facebook, to do a secure recovery. And we also hope that by having a diverse ecosystem, implementing a strong protocol dedicated to account recovery, you'll be able to trust multiple services instead of just one or two. Have an M of N model or recover with 2 or 3 different accounts. This isn't actually what GitHub is deploying for Facebook. You'll be able to use Facebook as one part of a 2-factor recovery process to recover a 2-factor protected account. And a slightly more nuanced answer to do I have to trust Facebook is, well, you don't have to trust Facebook any more than you already trust your email provider. And I think that actually you have to trust Facebook a lot less, or any other site implementing this recovery protocol, than you do with email. We talked about all those threats at the beginning that face email. And as a security engineer, when I think about a question like, do I trust Facebook, do I trust Google, I don't think about a monolithic entity that acts with a unity of purpose for good or evil. I think these are complex organizations. They have tens of thousands of employees. They're running hundreds of thousands of servers. There's hundreds of millions of lines of code in these systems. My question is, how much do I have to trust Facebook? And rather, really, how little can I trust Facebook? And by using a carefully designed, purpose-built system for recovery, without the conflicts of interest inherent in email, we can apply good security engineering practices to reduce the attack surface of a recovery protocol by a great deal compared to email. We have no user-visible data. We don't have to do things like scan for spam, scan for malware. We don't have to have any way of forwarding or giving users insecure ways of accessing them. We can encrypt them end-to-end at rest, so only a tiny number of highly privileged employees could ever see that data. And we can encrypt the countersigning key and protect it so that a completely different small set of people can see that. I think it's really possible here with the conscientious implementation that is obvious in the design to reduce the attack surface of an implementation by several orders of magnitude compared to a typical large-scale email deployment. And the other interesting thing is that you can trust yourself less. You can trust your personal IT ecosystem less. Again, email gets pushed all the way out to the end of all your devices. So if I log onto a friend's computer with my email that has malware, if I get XSS in my browser, if I install a compromised browser extension, it's pretty much game over for me on email. There's no way to rate limit or do anything like that. But because this protocol is designed explicitly for recovery, we can apply contextually appropriate reauthentication and security controls for every account recovery you do. Ask you for a fresh multi-factor challenge, notify you out of band, do rate limiting, and have an undeletable history of all your account recoveries that you can directly repudiate with the service providers involved. Here's an example of a screen showing me trying to recover my GitHub account. I have 2-factor authentication on my Facebook account, so it's going to ask me for a fresh press of my YubiKey or code from my code generator for every time I recover the account. This keeps a compromise at one part of my personal ecosystem from spreading like wildfire through my entire online life. And reducing something as ubiquitous as the password reset email is going to take time. I'm really excited today that GitHub is making that first connection with us. This is a live service here. So now you can recover a 2-factor protected GitHub account with 2-factor account recovery. But we really don't want this to be a Facebook-only service. We want to see more connections. We want to see more places to recover your Facebook account. We want to see more sites linking to Facebook and other services deploying this so that we can have that network effect protecting you that I described at the beginning. We're building this and we're giving it away because recovery is a problem that everyone shares, every online service has to deal with, and the best way for us to address it is to work together to solve it. Recovery isn't a product, it's a foundation. Secure account access is the foundation on which we build all of our other products. And I hope you're excited and you want to try it out immediately. As of today, as of 9 o'clock this morning, we've open sourced the protocol on Facebook's incubator site on GitHub. And this is to encourage people to get review from the security community. Tomorrow we'll be turning on the protocol for GitHub. You'll be able to set up Facebook as an extra factor for recovering your GitHub account. And in the coming weeks, we'll be providing open source implementations of the protocol, both from GitHub and Facebook in a couple of different languages, and looking for other early adopters of the protocol. All of this is immediately in scope for our bug bounty programs. Both GitHub and Facebook will jointly pay out vulnerabilities against the protocol itself. So if you're an academic researcher and that might be interesting to you, or if you're just a regular bug bounty hacker, hopefully that's a good thing. And then we hope to have general availability for any site to be able to use Facebook as an augmentation or replacement for their existing account recovery mechanisms, and to also start connecting Facebook accounts to recovery through GitHub and other places soon. I'm out of time, and I'll leave this up here while I take questions. Thank you very much for your time and attention.